everybody, it's Angie. I thought I'd do a recipe for you tonight. This is actually more like 3 recipes. I'm making dinner for my family, and tonight we're having salmon and my favorite side dish, couscous with lentils, and we're also having some mashed squash. Alright, so to begin, I'm just going to make a little marinade for my salmon. I'm just going to use less sodium soy sauce, and I don't really measure. I just make pretty much enough to coat the bottom of a container that is going to fit my piece of salmon. So I have, I don't know, that's probably 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, and then I'm going to add to that some balsamic vinegar, and that adds a little sweetness. This is going to be kind of a spicy sweet sauce. So about a teaspoon, let's make it a tablespoon of balsamic. Then for a little more sweetness, I'll put in agave nectar. You can also use honey, but I like agave because it has a lower glycemic index, which means that it won't spike your blood sugar. And it's sweeter than most sugar, so you can use less of it. So that's probably about a teaspoon. And then I'm going to use my wasabi mustard that I also eat on my sandwiches, and this will give it a nice little bit of heat. So I'm going to put in a good sized teaspoon of that. All right, and then I'm just going to whisk that all together. Okay, all right, and then I have my little package of salmon here. I take my salmon and I give it a rinse in cold water. All right, so this is a little bit under 1.5 pounds of salmon, so it's 2 decent sized fillets. I like to portion it out for my family, and this is the wild sockeye salmon. Now I buy this instead of the farm-raised salmon because I find that the farm-raised salmon has a lot of extra fat in it. They feed the salmon cornmeal, and so that goes through the fish, and we have so much corn in our diet as it is. I like to have the wild salmon that's just been eating what salmon naturally eat in the wild. Now, but in order to get sockeye salmon, you can't really get it fresh except for a couple times a year. So for this salmon, it has been frozen, which is why I like to marinate it. The farm-raised salmon is really fatty, and I find that when I cook it, all the fat kind of comes out of the fish and is in the pan, and it smells a lot worse when you're cooking it. You know, when you cook fish, you don't want your whole house to smell like it. And this nice, lean, wild sockeye salmon doesn't really smell when you cook it. My youngest likes the skinny piece, so I always give her a nice piece from the tail. They're all in the marinade, and I'm just going to put the salmon in the fridge to marinate for about 20 minutes while I prep up the rest of the stuff for the side dishes. For the squash, I have just a whole, what is this, a butternut squash, I think? I guess. I have the oven preheating to 350. So basically all I want to do is cut it in half, scoop out the seeds, and then put it on a cookie tray to roast it. A big spoon, and remove the seeds. Take some olive oil, cooking spray, coat the pan, just a light coating, and I'm just going to put these on face down. And then those are going in my preheated 350 degree oven. I'm going to cook the lentils and the couscous separately, and then mix them together at the end. We'll start cooking the lentils and have them cooking in the meantime while the squash is cooking and the salmon's marinating. And I guess I'll do the whole half a package, although I might not use them all today. So basically you need to rinse them. So I just put them in a colander and just rinse them with cold water. After they're rinsed, you just put them in a saucepan, and then you just cover them with cold water. So then we just put them on the stove. All right, so the flame's on under there. Put in a little olive oil. And because everything in this world needs salt and pepper, a little salt, and a grind of pepper. Now you can also use chicken broth if you want for this. Now when that boils, we'll put a lid on it and let it simmer for 30 minutes. And then the couscous we don't have to make until the last minute because that only takes 5 minutes. But to flavor up the couscous and the lentils, I'm just going to saute up some onions and carrots and celery. I don't tend to buy the rice packets that are pre-made. I feel like they have way too much sodium in them, so I like to make my own. Okay, so I find that having a really sharp knife helps, and this is an excellent knife. I love this thing. If you hate cooking, I recommend, wow, things are flying all over the place. I recommend that you get some nice knives. And then you will enjoy your cooking so much more, but be careful because they are super sharp, and of course you don't want to hurt yourself. Okay, so I'm just going to push the onions to the side and chop up this celery. So I've got a couple of stalks. They're already washed. I don't know if you noticed, but I switched cutting boards. I use plastic for the fish, and I only use my wood cutting boards for vegetables. I never use them for chicken or meat or fish or anything else. So now for the carrot, got these big carrots. So now this is all going to go into a skillet, which I have warming over here. Okay, just going to turn this heat up a bit. Oh, look at that, my lentils are boiling. So that means I can put them on low, put a lid on, and in a half an hour they will be ready. But I like to check them in about 20 minutes because sometimes they cook faster and you don't want mushy lentils. So back over here to this pan, just going to put in a tablespoon or 2 of olive oil and saute up the vegetables. And I just throw them all in together. And I'm just going to let those saute. I'm using the same spoon. They're all going to end up in the same place eventually. All right, and so that's our prep work. So our salmon's in the fridge, our squash is in the oven, and our lentils and our lentil and couscous flavoring is cooking. So in about, I don't know, I'd say 7 minutes, these will be ready. So I'll be right back. Okay, now while all that's cooking and marinating, I'm going to prep up the couscous. Now this is organic, this is whole wheat couscous, so it's browner than the regular couscous. This is a really small grain, and what's good about couscous is that it cooks up really fast. It only takes it 5 minutes to cook. So, you know, I like brown rice, but that takes like 45 minutes to cook. And when I'm trying to cook, I know you're going to think this is funny, that this is a quick meal for me. A quick meal, I want my grain to cook up quickly. So to make a cup of couscous, you need a cup and a quarter of cold water. You're going to put that in the pan, and then it also wants a 1/4 teaspoon salt and a teaspoon of butter, which it says optional. And you know, as you know, I don't really use butter in any of my cooking, so I'm just going to put in a little bit of salt, and I'm going to use olive oil instead of butter. So I'm just going to throw in about a teaspoon of olive oil. You don't need much. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do for that. I'm just going to measure this out so I have it ready. This is going to be 1 cup of couscous. So I'm just going to put this over here for now. Okay, and in the meantime, I'm getting out my grill pan. That's what I'm going to cook my salmon in. I love this one. I got it at IKEA, and I think it was like $14, and I've had it for a couple of years now. And it's a great little pan. And I also have my food processor out and ready for the squash when that comes out of the oven. So now it's just waiting. So I'm going to go and fold a basket of laundry. Yay! All right, so the squash is out of the oven. It was in there for 25 minutes, and now it's nice and soft and ready to go in the food processor. So when you can stick a fork or a toothpick in it and it goes into the thicker part nice and easily, that's how you know it's done. Now you want to wait a little while, maybe 5 more minutes for it to be cool enough to handle, because you don't want to burn yourself when you're scooping it out to put it in the food processor. And so in the time it took to cook the squash, our onions and celery and carrots are done, and the lentils are done as well. So I'm going to turn off the fire under the lentils, And they can just sit there for a while until we're ready for them. And this is off as well, and they're just going to sit there for a while until we're ready for them. All right, so just put on the water under the couscous, and when that boils, I will just dump in the couscous, turn it off, put the lid on, and it'll be ready to go. All right, now the pan for my salmon should be nice and hot. So again, I'm just going to take my olive oil. This is extra virgin olive oil. And lightly coat my pan. And here's my salmon out of the fridge that's been marinating. So you want to have your pan be hot before you add the oil. And I like to use tongs to manhandle my fish. So I prefer that to like a spatula. So now I'm just going to take each piece, and as you can see, it's nicely marinated. I'm going to start it skin side up. So when you put it on, you should get that nice sizzle. All right, and this will take about 7 minutes on each side to cook. And if you want, you can turn on your vent hood to start drawing any odors out to the outside world. But I'm going to leave mine off since you probably can't hear me if I do that. All right, I like to put the thickest piece in the center of the pan closest to the heat, and then the thinner pieces out to the outside. But I want the whole pan to stay pretty hot because I want a nice kind of grilled look for this. So these grill marks will leave nice char marks on the other side. And I'm just going to let it sit there. I'm not going to touch it and move it around a lot. I'm just going to let it sit there and cook for the full 7 minutes. So in the meantime, this couscous water is boiling. So I'm going to add that. So you just pour that in. And again, I'm using the same spoon as with the lentils and the vegetables because they're all going to go together. Can you see that? You pour that in, and then when it comes back to a boil, all you do is turn it off and put the lid on. And that just needs, okay, it's boiling, all right? So I'm just going to put the lid on and turn the heat off on that. I'm just going to set my timer to 5 minutes, and when that goes off, the couscous will be done, the fish will be ready to turn. All right, so basically you just want to take it out of the skin, and you can either peel the skin off, or I like to use a spoon and scoop it. And I tend to get it all over my mitten. My mitten's filthy, but that's all right. You know, when you're hearing nutrition information and they say to eat the rainbow, this is what they're talking about. We're having, I guess tonight would be orange night for the rainbow. Having orange squash and orange salmon, salmon-colored salmon. And what's nice about this is that now I can just take this, fold it up, and my pan only needs a little rinse and it's all clean. Now, as you know, I don't use butter, so for this I will again be using olive oil. So I'll just pour some in there. And I like salt and pepper on everything. So I'm going to put in some pepper and a little salt. Now, my kids like this sweet, so agave nectar. I'm just going to pour probably about a teaspoon of that in. Okay, it's time to check the salmon. So I like to just give it a little wiggle to loosen it up, and then flip it over, and that is looking pretty perfect. All right. Now I like to start it skin side up, so that all the omega-3s and good fats fall from the skin down into the meat. Because we want to eat those, because that's what keeps skin looking young and the muscles healthy. Alright, so those guys are coming out looking great. Now there's my timer for the 5 minutes, so that's great. That's been 7. And I'm just going to reset it for another 5. Now because this salmon is so thin, it'll cook up like that. If I had a thicker piece, I would do the 7 minutes, 7 minutes, and then I would leave the oven on from the squash, and at the end this handle comes off and I would just throw this in the oven to finish it off. Alright, so back to the squash. Alright, so I'm just going to put in some cinnamon and brown sugar for the squash. You can put in whatever spices your family likes. It's really good with ginger. It's really good with nutmeg. If you want it to taste more like Thanksgiving, this is more of a like Thanksgiving type flavor, but they like it this way. Some people like maple syrup. And so I'm just going to put in a little brown sugar to give it that nice kind of molassesy flavor. So I'd say there was maybe a tablespoon of that went in. All right, so we're just going to cover that and let it blast away. Now, if it's too thick and won't grind up, it should grind up just fine. It really doesn't need any other liquids. You could put in a little chicken broth. You could do it just with chicken broth, salt, and pepper. There's so many ways to do it. It really doesn't need butter to become creamy. It has a creamy texture all on its own. All right, and I think that should do it on that. So look at that, nice pureed. So I'm just going to leave it closed so that stays warm. Now let's go back over here. Our couscous is ready. I'm just going to take a slotted spoon and just pull out a big scoopful of lentils. And I'm going to let a little bit of the juice come along because that'll help to lighten up the couscous a little bit. Can you see the couscous in there? Let me move it over here more. Is that better? Now you can see it. Okay, and we also need some of this. So we're going to put in a little of that, and then we just mix this all together. Kind of wish I had done this in the bigger pan, making it kind of hard to mix. And I'm even going to throw in some of the lentil water, because that is full of good nutrition. And I'm just going to mix that up. We are pretty much done. Able to stir it too well in the pan. I'm going to give it another stir in the serving bowl, and in here I'm going to just add a little more salt and pepper just to brighten this up a little bit. There is our bowl of homemade couscous with lentils. Okay, put that in a bowl, and that is ready to eat. The last thing to come off, which is done now, is the salmon. And if you kind of give it a wiggle, you can get it to leave the skin right in the pan. So there's the finished salmon, and there's the skin still sitting in the pan. All right, and that is what your salmon should look like when you're done. And here is the whole meal for my family for tonight. So we're going to sit down and eat it. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.